Very much. Welcome to the college debrief. We are today the 15th of December. I must say that the college meeting is still ongoing, so it is a slightly special readout that we're giving today, but in view of the importance of the subject and your deadlines, we have decided to move forward. I immediately pass the floor to Executive Vice President Mrs. Vestager.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the college readout. We have actually not finished the meeting, but I would like to give you still an overview of the points that was discussed before moving to the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. We started our meeting today with an exchange with Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO. Then the college discussed the new cybersecurity strategy together with proposals to enhance the resilience of key digital and physical entities. The new strategy will indeed bolster our collective resilience against cyber threats, and we have a lot of those. So, about time. The proposals will be presented by my colleagues Joseph Borrell, Margrethe and Thierry during a press conference tomorrow morning. Then we discussed the action plan on tackling non-performing loans in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. And what it does is that it puts forward a range of measures to address a renewed build-up of non-performing loans on banks' balance sheets after the COVID-19 pandemic. This will enable banks to continue lending to households and to businesses, and, of course, by doing that, to support the economic recovery. Executive Vice President Valdis Dombrovskis and Commissioner Margrethe McGuinness, they will be here in the press room to present this action plan to you tomorrow. The President debriefed us all on the European Council, that we found to be successful. And as I speak now, Michel Barnier is debriefing the College on the state of play in the EU-UK negotiations. Finally, the Commission has decided to appoint Mr. John Watson as the new Deputy Secretary General. And with this said, please let me move to the proposals that Thierry and myself are presenting here today. Because what we are going to present to you are two milestones in our journey to make Europe fit for digital age: the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. The two proposals, they serve one purpose: to make sure that we, as users, as customers, businesses, have access to a wide choice of safe products and services online, just as well as we do in the physical world. And that all businesses operating in Europe, that can be big ones, that can be small ones, that they can freely and fairly compete online, just as they do offline. Because this is one world. Whether from our streets or from our screens, we should be able to do our shopping in a safe manner. Whether we turn pages or we just scroll down, we should be able to choose and to trust the news that we read. And of course, what is illegal offline is equally illegal online. I will say a few words about the two proposals and then, of course, Thierry as well, and we hope to be able to take questions and for you to meet your deadlines. I've been wondering how to give a metaphor, because these are two quite complex proposals. And the best thing I think I came to think of was the first ever traffic light that brought order in the streets. That was actually in the US, in Cleveland, Ohio. And that was invented as a response to a major technological disruption, the invention of the car. And I think just like back then, it's more than 100 years ago, now we have such an increase in the online traffic that we need to make rules that put order into chaos. And that is what the Digital Services Act is all about. Creating new rules, making the online world a safe, reliable, secure space for users of digital roads. because we should be able to trust what we see online, to navigate without being confronted with terrorist propaganda, and feeling certain that the toy that we buy online is safe, just as well as the toy that we buy in a brick-and-mortar shop. Three main actions in the Digital Services Act: more safety for users, increasing transparency of platforms, and better enforcement. Safety first, obviously, because a safe digital space is one that protects users from illegal and harmful content while preserving the freedom of expression. And that is the very important balance that we have been keeping. So we introduce new due diligence obligations. Digital platforms will be required to swiftly remove illegal content, but in parallel to explain why to the user, why the content was removed, and give him or her an option to complain about it. Also, the new obligation to know your customer will require online marketplaces to check their seller's identity before they are allowed on the platform, which will make it so much more difficult for dodgy traders to do their business. Then transparency. It's quite difficult to realize, to see through why you see this and not that. Why is one seller ranked higher than another? Why do we get to see this first, this second, and maybe something not at all? So the Digital Services Act will also require platforms to tell us how their algorithms work, how their recommender system selects the content that they show us, but not require platforms to reveal their algorithms, but to give us a better idea of who is trying to influence us and give us a choice as to whether we want to trust this or not. And last but not least, enforcement, because no legislation is any better than the enforcement of it. For people to travel safely, well, we need to have the same rules across Europe. This is why it's a regulation. This is why it's based on single market legal basis. And it needs to be tied to possible sanctions. We maintain the country of origin principle that everyone knows so well, but member states will be much better equipped to enforce their national laws, and the authorities that are to where the platforms are established, well, they will be much better at imposing redress actions if a platform fails to comply. So there will be a European approach to having still the country of origin principle. Now turning to the Digital Markets Act. This is our second proposal, and where the Digital Service Act is horizontal, applies to everyone, well, the Digital Markets Act applies specifically to what we call gatekeepers. And gatekeepers, they are defined by a special role that they fulfill in the marketplace. A role defined by the size, the role they play, and the durability in the market. So first on size. Gatekeepers, they are large players in terms of annual turnover, market capitalization, and they are active in several member states. Second, their role, that they are really operating as gatekeepers, so that they are in between a large number of businesses and an even larger number of individual users. So they play a special role for businesses actually to get access to their customers. And third, the durability, that they have this entrenched position over quite some time. I think you can imagine how this combination of criteria can give gatekeepers an unfair advantage in a given service. And that is very often an unbalanced relationship. And this is nothing new for us. We have seen this in numerous competition cases. And this was one of the reasons why we asked the three special advisors to prepare sort of the thinking, how can we be better at dealing with this unbalanced relationship? And one of the things they suggested was indeed that vigilant competition law enforcement is combined with regulation. And as you will know from the casework that the Commission has been doing, that I have been responsible for, is not one, it's not two, it's 3 Google cases. We have seen this behaviour. It's the first Amazon case concerning e-books. Now we have a second one, a third investigation ongoing. National authorities, they have been dealing with cases, for instance, by Booking.com, and complaints keep coming through our doors, so we have many more investigations right now. So, obviously, this is to complement vigilant competition law enforcement. This is to do the same thing as we have been doing in banking, in telecoms, in energy, to realise that antitrust will have to work hand in hand with regulation, so that we have a complete set of tools. And then just what are these tools? Well, the tools are actually quite simple, because once you're designated a gatekeeper, you will have to live up to a number of obligations. And I will just name 3. The use of data, interoperability, and self-preferencing. The use of data. A gatekeeper gathers enormous amounts of data. So they also gather enormous insights in the ups and downs of their competitor. They will know who buys what, when, at what price, how do they pay. They know if you hesitated or you went straight to buy what you wanted. So the point is here to say that gatekeepers shall no longer use the data they collect from all businesses that they host when competing against them. And that would imply data silos that allow for the separation of data generated in the different business lines. Second, interoperability. This concerns a situation where a gatekeeper is offering an extra service. One example could be a gatekeeper developing a new payment solution that work with a piece of software and a piece of hardware, and maybe only making it available for its own payment solution. Now, the interoperability obligation, well, that will say, well, you need to make it available also for others who can compete with you in providing this payment solution. Finally, self-preferencing. Because we have seen platforms, gatekeepers, who treat their own services more favourable than those of their competitors. For instance, by ranking their own services higher than their competitors, and in doing that, attracting more users. So the point is here to oblige the gatekeeper to adjust the search algorithm to make sure that rival offers, well, they receive the same level of provenance as their own offers would do. In this proposal, there is a sense of future-proofing, because it's also dynamic. We can do investigations, if it need be, so that we can see if gatekeepers are emerging, and we can put them then obligations. And this is, of course, because without enforcement, not worth much. And here again, if a gatekeeper breaks the rules, we can impose fines. If it's done several times, repeatedly, we can also impose structural remedies, divestiture, that sort of things. And as said, this is a complement to competition law enforcement. It is somewhat complex, but we are looking very much forward. I know the level of complexity because it has taken the 2 of us to get it done, and many, many people in our services. So it is with some level of, well, maybe not pride, but thankfulness that we stand here today. Thierry?
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Margrethe. It has been an unbelievable journey that we had to go through together, you, myself, and our teams over the past year. Unbelievable journey. But here we are today, and you just all remember that our President, Ursula von der Leyen, tasked us, both of us, to come back as soon as possible with a new proposal. She said it will be great if you can do it in 2020. We are the 15th of December. Here we are. Here we are together. And that's true, that's very important. So I will be short. And I would like to, because Margrethe said already almost everything, and I know that you had also a technical briefing this morning, but I just want to tell you in few words what are these two acts and what they are not. And by the way, also maybe a little bit of internal cooking, how we have been able to do it. So I will start by the internal cooking. We had a lot of interactions. Of course, Margrethe and myself, our teams. I would like to mention also, of course, the President. She was extremely involved in it, our cabinet, our staff, but also a lot of external stakeholders. Because this is a very important subject for all of us. And everyone has something to say. Our children, our companies, our governments, the UN, the NGOs, of course the parliaments, and believe me, the parliament is really on it. And when I say the parliament, it's of course the European parliaments, but the parliaments for all our 27 member states. And we decided, Margrethe and myself, that we will spend the first half of the year while listening to these stakeholders. And we have asked all these stakeholders to come back to us with their ideas, requests, fears, hope, ambitions. And they answered massively. 3,000 answers, contributions. That's huge. 2/3 coming from Europe, from everybody. 1/3 coming from outside of the EU. Believe me, everyone answered. And we took the time, Margrethe and myself, including, by the way, during the summertime, to look at it. Of course, we will not make everybody happy. But we took our decision. We are a political body, and it's our role to take political decisions. This is exactly what we are presenting to you today. What it is not, this is not, and we will never say here, either myself, of course, Margrethe neither, we believe that this company or that company are too big. We don't say that here in Europe. We respect companies. But we say that the bigger they are, the more obligations they may have to fulfill what is important to us. In other words, what it is to give clarity, to give visibility, to give objectives. Everybody is welcome in Europe. But our responsibility is to decide and to give the directions and the rules just to protect what is important to us. In other words, this is not two acts where we will say, oh, this company is too big, we will propose a dismantlement. Not here, not on this side of the ocean. You will never hear either, of course, Margrethe and myself to say that. This is, again, not against, it is for. It is for our European citizens, it is for our democracy, it is for our companies, it is for innovations, it is for fair competition, it's not against anybody. So this being said, I just would like to say, of course, that with regulation, as Margrethe said, you need to have also sanctions. We hope, of course, that we will not have to apply these sanctions. Mais on sait aussi que quand il y a une bonne régulation, eh ben, il faut aussi avoir des sanctions, ne serait-ce que pour protéger l'immense majorité qui va respecter ces règles. Donc, on a pris, et c'est là où l'expérience de Margrethe a été extraordinairement importante, parce qu'évidemment, on a pris beaucoup de règles qui ont fait leurs preuves, y compris dans les sanctions, dans le monde de la concurrence, puis on les a appliquées parce qu'on sait qu'elles marchent. Elles sont souvent suffisamment importantes pour décourager les mauvaises pratiques, mais des fois aussi pas assez. Et donc, on a pris toute la panoplie des sanctions, jusqu'à, évidemment, si jamais on répète, c'est des amendes. Et puis, si jamais ça se répétait, notamment pour le DMA, on sait que dans les règles de concurrence, ça peut aller jusqu'à la proposition d'une séparation structurelle. Et on l'a mis, encore une fois, dans les sanctions. C'est ça ce que c'est le DSA, c'est ça ce que c'est le DMA. Deuxième point, Margrethe l'a dit, mais je voudrais le redire très rapidement, parce qu'il faut laisser la place aux questions. Le DSA, c'est une législation horizontale. On fait ça, on en est bien conscient, sans doute pour les années qui viennent, quand on sait que la dernière, c'était en 2000, et quand on sait le travail que ça a représenté, que ça représente pour nos équipes, et puis on ne se fait pas d'illusions, Margrethe, qu'on va aussi avoir maintenant pour finaliser tout ça, notamment avec le Parlement, mais on sait qu'il y a beaucoup de soutien, les États membres nous soutiennent aussi beaucoup, mais enfin, il y a ensuite la démocratie, le temps de la démocratie, et on sera évidemment présents tous les deux pour expliquer, et aller évidemment jusqu'au trilogue final. Il n'empêche, il n'en demeure pas moins que nous sommes conscients que ce qu'on fait ça va normalement structurer pour des années. Et plus ça sera long, mieux ce sera pour l'activité, pour l'économie, pour l'innovation, parce que les entreprises, qui sont les bienvenues, les grandes plateformes aussi, ont besoin de lisibilité. Elles ont juste besoin qu'on leur dise ce qu'on peut faire et ce qu'on ne peut pas faire. Pour le DSA, des obligations, on va les auditer. Quand elles sont suffisamment systémiques, on l'a dit, c'est qu'on est des très grandes plateformes. En gros, plus de 10% de la population européenne comme client, ça fait en gros plus de 45 millions dans 3 pays, c'est quand même déjà des plateformes très significatives. Vous avez des obligations supplémentaires parce que la viralité peut être importante. Quand il se passe quelque chose, on peut toucher beaucoup plus de monde. For the DMA, this is really something different because, of course, now the DMA, it's a regulation ex ante. And we had a lot of discussion. I understand that in other countries or continents, they will stick only to the pure competition rules. For us, we decided, based, of course, of the experience already in this house and under Margrethe leadership, that we had to take maybe another approach with an ex ante to be quick and fast. Because we know that in the digital space, digital sphere, speed is of the essence. And we need to act quickly. Because if we don't act quickly, we may then disturb concurrence and destroy opportunities for some players who could, if not, could have been successful innovators. And this is why here we have also some different criteria, of course, and of course different obligations, ex ante. And the criteria, as Margrethe said, are the size. And we define the size by, of course, revenue. But we know also that in the 21st century, revenue are linked also with market power or fair market value. This is why we have an or, certain level of revenue, or a specific market value. By the way, you see that the market value, fair market value, is roughly around 65 billion. This is what is written in the document you will have. It represents, just to give you an idea, if you take Euro Stock 50, the average market value of the 50 biggest companies in Europe is roughly 55, 56 billion. So it means that you belong to the first half of the 50 largest company in Europe, which is already quite successful. And of course, and we encourage this, but bigger size, bigger responsibility. I don't want to be more long. We will have also, in terms of condition, of course, the number of, for DMA, the number of customers, same thing if it's B2C, 10% of the European population, and if it's B2B, 10,000 of these customers. So that's, we believe, a very, very balanced approach, very clear, with clear obligations. Again, everybody will be welcome. We will just organize ourselves so that we hope to be one of the most active digital markets in the world while respecting everything which is important to us that I just mentioned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to both of you for these introductions. Let's move to the questions and answer session. We have interpretation, to remind you, in German, English, French, Italian, Danish, Spanish, and international sign. And we will go immediately to the floor. I give the floor to Mathis.
Hi, my name is Matthijs Schiffers, het Financiële Dagblad from the Netherlands. I have a question for Commissioner Vestager. What is the main reason that the college meeting took so long today? I'm asking this because there have been quite some rumors that there are quite some different opinions on the DSA and the DMA within the college, not the least between you and Mr. BRETON. Is there any merit in these rumors, or can you put them to bed? And the second question is regarding the sanctions, the fines, 6 to 10%, I read in the documents. Is that of total sales of company, global sales, or European sales? Because I'm hearing some different views on that.
Well, thank you very much. It was a very good college. I think we spent the first 2 hours with NATO's Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg. The first time ever that a NATO General Secretary actually visits the College of the European Union. And then we discussed a number of other things. Actually, I don't know if I say too much. I was a bit disappointed that we didn't have more time for the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, because as I think it is obvious, we have put a lot of effort into these two proposals. So that was not the case. I have also, well, maybe it's too much to say that it's rumors. I have read an article about the differences between Thierry and myself, I think they are obvious. I can confirm that we are different people. I also can confirm that we have discussions. And I think that is what leads to good, strong proposals. And this is why we're here today. If we were the same, well, I think our president would have to put something else down in the boil, in the bowl, actually, to make it cook and to produce something of value. So in that respect, I think you can rest assured that something is true. Yes, we're different, but something is true as well. This is our common proposal, and this is by the entire Commission. On the question of fines, it is indeed 6% in the Digital Services Act and 10% in the Digital Markets Act. It is Article 26, and it is 10% of its total turnover, each undertaking, the total turnover in the preceding financial year.
Just one word on the first one, of course, Margrethe said everything. I don't have anything to add. If maybe one little thing, when we come to college, politically, of course, everything is already stabilized because we had already our discussion between us, and of course, including with our cabinet, and we have many internal discussions for months. So this is absolutely not related to the length of this college. We have so many subjects. So that's just to answer to your question, and I fully concur, of course, with what Margrethe said. The second one, of course, is the 6 and 10% is for global turnover, which is important, not only European turnover.
Thank you. We go to SILVIA now. SILVIA, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah,
great. Thank you so much for your time. I have two questions. One, when would you like to see these rules adopted? Do you think this could actually be sooner than usual when it comes to how fast the European Union implements laws? And then a second question, some of your work in the past has seen some backlash, in particularly from the United States. I was just wondering if you're expecting that sort of backlash once again, or whether the conversations that you might have with your US colleagues has been slightly different this time. Thank you very much to both.
Well, we've been, as Thierry said initially, we've been working very much with both the European Parliament and with member states. I was in the European Parliament when there was a debate about their own initiative reports. More than 60 members of Parliament took the floor, a lot of interest. And I think you'd see also that a lot of what we have put in here also is answering some of the asks from the European Parliament. So, of course, we hope that it can be as fast as possible. I still think that fast in this connection is a year and a half, give or take, and then another 6 months for the regulation actually to take effect. Then there will be some back and forth for the Digital Markets Act about who to be designated gatekeeper, but I still think that we quite fast actually can have results from this. Obviously, we are eager to work with Member States and Parliament to make it even faster, so I don't think that it will depend on us. On the question of the US, when I first came into the job as Commissioner for Competition, of course, I was traveling the US. I was visiting colleagues and also both sides of the aisle going up and down the hill. And that was a different world, completely different world. They were kind of, what are you doing in Europe? Now, the US, us, the Australians, the Canadians, the Japanese, is part of a global conversation about how to balance things, because the important thing here is with size comes responsibility. And I think with the sort of preparedness coming from us reaching out for the EU-US partnership, obviously pandemic first, then climate change, but also focusing on digital eras, there are no surprises here for our US colleagues. Of course, to some degree, they will see things differently because it's another market and another nation. But I think the debate will be very different than if we had tabled this 5 years ago.
Maybe I could. That's a very important question because, of course, timing is everything. But we are a democracy. And by the way, the US also are a big democracy. It takes time in a democracy to have this kind of huge act to be adopted, and we have to respect the time of democracy. But as Margrethe said, we prepared extremely well, I think, ourselves in the enormous interaction that we had, of course, with member states and with the parliament. By the way, a lot of members of parliament worked extremely well and gave us a lot of ideas and input. And we put this again in this act. So, yes, we will respect this. Hopefully, we'll be able to start as early as very soon, early next year. But I just wanted to say a few things. First, it's not a directive, it's a règlement, which means that we will be able to apply it very quickly. This is also one of the reasons, and homogeneously all over Europe. That's another reason why we selected this. Second thing, 3 months application for the DSA, 6 months for the DMA. So as soon as it will be in place, we can move very quickly. Third, and this is something that I wanted to share with you. We have been in interactions almost on a daily basis with all the big platforms. By the way, some of these big platforms will belong to the categories that we described, Margrethe and myself, as the systemic platforms or gatekeepers. And every time, and especially during the crisis, and during the first wave of the crisis, we said, hey, be careful. You have to correct this. Too many hate speeches. You have to be careful with your ongoing. And I should tell you, because I have been engaging with them. For most of them, they understood and they tried to move. And we said, we will do it at the end of the year. By the way, it will happen. It will happen maybe in 6 months, in 1 year. And by the way, this is something that you need to anticipate. And guess what? A lot of these platforms already anticipated what we discussed with them. And I'm a strong believer also of soft governance, because at the end of the day, we believe that with systemic players or very big platforms, the bigger you are, the more responsibility you have vis-à-vis the society. And they understand that. And they need to have what we believe is a good behavior for us, Europeans. So, of course, we will have on one hand the law, okay, et ça, on va faire en sorte que ça soit le plus vite possible. Et d'un autre côté, on a aussi le comportement. Et je peux vous dire que pour beaucoup de ces plateformes, le comportement, c'est important, parce qu'elles aussi, elles ont besoin de recruter des jeunes talents. Et que pour les jeunes talents aujourd'hui, choisir une société, c'est aussi important de savoir qu'elle se comporte comme nous pensons, nous, correctement, en fonction de ce que nous croyons être nos valeurs et nos objectifs à partager avec eux. Donc je suis plutôt optimiste, même si nous sommes conscients, on en parle souvent, Margrethe et moi-même, voilà, on va avoir une année 2021 active sur ce sujet. Mais on part confiant, tous les deux.
Merci beaucoup. Nous passons à David Carretta. David.
Oui, merci beaucoup. David Carretta, Radio Radicale, Italian Radio. First question to Vice President Vestager, and it will not be on Alitalia. Very easy. How many European companies will be defined as gatekeepers or systemic platforms? Et une question pour le commissaire Breton. Beaucoup de ces plateformes ont investi, innové. Si on va pouvoir offrir nos cadeaux de Noël à nos enfants cette année, ça va être probablement grâce à une de ces plateformes qui va nous amener des cadeaux plus vite que le Père Noël. Je me demande pourquoi on ne peut pas appliquer les règles du monde physique au monde digital au lieu de créer des nouvelles règles spécifiques. Quand, par exemple, on a dans le monde physique des situations, vous l'avez lu ce matin sur Libération, où des producteurs de vêtements utilisent à la fin du travail forcé des Ouïghours en Chine, et tout cela est très légal, il n'y a aucun problème, et on ne fait pas de législation à côté. Pourquoi on ne peut pas adopter une même législation pour les deux espaces? Merci.
Well, we've been discussing back and forth this question about whether or not to name the companies that we think comes within these presumption. as Thierry mentioned, an EU turnover of 6.5 billion, or average market capitalization of 65 billion, being present in at least 3 member states with one core platform service, 45 million active users per month, 10,000 yearly business users per month. And we've been going back and forth because here we lay out some objective criteria that sort of translates the requirements of size and being an important gateway and having a durability. And we decided to say, well, it is for the companies themselves to identify because it may be market sensitive. It may also be that they are in 2 of the criteria or 3 of the criteria, but not in all of the criteria. If they're not in all of the criteria, then eventually we may do an investigation to see if it's an emerging gatekeeper. But also it's for them to rebut these assumptions of being a gatekeeper. And this is why I think it would be premature for us here to say, well, it's that and that and that platform, and definitely not those and those and those. So that will remain to be seen.
Juste un mot sur la deuxième question sur les cadeaux de Noël, parce que c'est un sujet d'actualité. Encore une fois, tout le monde est le bienvenu. Et on est parfaitement, non seulement conscient, mais on encourage la transition numérique, dont on sait qu'elle va profondément changer nos modes de comportement, l'organisation de notre environnement économique, y compris dans tous les écosystèmes qui composent aujourd'hui le marché intérieur. On est totalement, encore une fois, pour développer, bien entendu, ou que ceux qui sont les innovateurs puissent développer ce type de pratique. Maintenant, un point très intéressant que vous avez indiqué. Sur certaines de ces plateformes, on avait jusqu'à présent un peu un sentiment d'impunité. C'est-à-dire qu'on se disait, je suis sur une plateforme, je peux faire ou dire n'importe quoi, y compris par parenthèse, vendre, être l'intermédiaire de produits dont je ne me souciais peu de la façon dont ils avaient été fabriqués, ni où, ni comment, ni selon certaines régulations. Je connais bien le monde de l'entreprise, que ce soit offline ou online. Je peux vous dire que dans la plupart des cas désormais, avec les évolutions en matière de gouvernance, notamment sur la raison d'être, the purpose, de plus en plus, la pression extérieure, les analystes, les agences de notation, qu'elles soient encore une fois pour noter des activités économiques ou des activités qui sont des activités sociales, environnementales, ça pèse de plus en plus. Et aujourd'hui, si une entreprise, par exemple, je vais citer personne, et je ne pense à personne, fabrique des vêtements, des chaussures, de sport ou je ne sais quoi, et qu'on se rend compte que celles-ci ont été faites dans des conditions qui sont les conditions que vous semblez pouvoir décrire, je peux vous dire que dans le monde physique, les CEO, eh bien, ils font très attention à ça parce qu'ils connaissent l'impact que ça peut avoir si jamais effectivement cet événement est non seulement découvert, mais ensuite rendu public. Donc, il y a une autorégulation qui se fait. Eh bien, voyez-vous, dans le monde online, cette autorégulation, elle ne se faisait pas encore, parce qu'on avait le sentiment, encore une fois, qu'on était en impunité. C'est pour ça que nous mettons précisément dans le DMA, et notamment pour ces gatekeepers, et notamment en ce qui concerne la vente de produits, pour éviter aussi les produits contrefaits, qui est un vrai sujet, eh bien, nous mettons cette obligation de Know Your Customers, c'est-à-dire que vous avez l'obligation de savoir, eh bien, quand vous vendez, si jamais il y a un produit illégal qui est découvert, vous devez savoir qui est celui qui est à l'origine pour commencer précisément à imposer ce type de comportement, ce qui ne veut absolument pas dire qu'on ne va pas encourager, ce n'est pas notre rôle. On laisse évidemment la libre entreprise se développer, mais on met des règles, y compris là, sur ce point précis, des règles qui existaient soit de façon totalement hard law, soit de façon soft law, eh bien on les transpose dans l'espace informationnel.
Merci. Nous passons à Yunchi.
It's a question for the Vice President. I was wondering, with these DSA and DMA rules, what about your ongoing antitrust cases, for example, into Amazon and Google and Facebook? Do you see that concluding before the rules are in place, or will it be the other way around, or conclude or at the same time? Thank you.
What we are suggesting here is without prejudice, both to 101 and 102. And actually, there's also some room for national competition legislation. Of course, you cannot sort of undermine neither the Digital Services Act or the Digital Markets Act, but actually you can do more. So we can continue the cases that we're doing, and we will indeed continue the cases. And of course, we will do our best to finalize those as fast as possible. You know, we just sent a statement of objection to Amazon while opening another Amazon case. The Apple cases are also quite advanced. So, of course, we will continue doing our job because the people depending on a solution on those issues, they shall not wait for these regulations to come in place.
Thank you. We move now to Matthew Newman. Mic source, Matthew. Yeah.
Can you hear me over? Okay, sorry about that. So, Commissioner Vestager, I wanted to ask, well, for either of you, actually, who wants to take the question. It's about the Digital Services Act. And as you know, most of these big U.S. tech companies have their main establishment in Ireland. And I understand very well that the regulation clearly states that the national authorities need to have the authority to enforce the regulation. So my question is about the enforcement structure. Do you expect that for the very large companies, the very large platforms, that Ireland will get most of the investigations, get most of the complaints, similar to what's going on with the data protection regulation? Or do you expect, because the rules are written in a way that most of these pan-European services are by the big tech companies, the large platforms, and it's actually the European Commission that will take the bulk of the complaints, the bulk of the investigations? And where does that leave the member states if they have issues with these large companies? Thanks very much.
Well, I think sort of the state of play is a rather complicated relationship between country of origin and a number of member states. There's been some robust exchanges, so to speak. Not all probably, well, a lot can be said about this. The new situation will be that here there is a number of things that are clearly to be enforced. These things are new. So we're coming from a situation where there weren't that many rules, actually very few, to a situation where you have a clear framework as to what has to be enforced. And that is then for the country of origin, for the main ballpark of that. But for the country of destination of services, both they can have their own national services and they, of course, can ask the country of origin to do the job of enforcing these rules. If that is not happening, and here we are suggesting timelines, deadlines as to when it should happen, then eventually the Commission can take over and actually do it. And this is to make a new balance between the country of origin and the country of destination of services. And of course, we hope that over time, this will build a renewed trust between member states, that this is something that we do together. And the second thing that I would like to mention is, of course, that we're talking a lot about the big ones. But as it is now, we have quite a degree of fragmentation between different national rules in these areas. And that can make it very difficult for a small company actually to scale, because you have to figure out what is the rules here, what are the rules there, what is the rules in the third place. Now, when it is a regulation and it will be the same rules, well, then you can just focus on your scaling up and not to have lawyers to work in figuring out what it is actually is that we want to do. So there is a very positive side effect for smaller businesses being able to scale up in a real digital single market.
If I may say so, it's not like for GDPR, and this is why I think it is really something specific. First, you could settle everywhere you want. It will be the same everywhere. Everywhere in Europe, it will be the same. You will have a local authority and this local authority will have to act when there is something happening on the network, either in the country of origin or country of destination. And as Margrethe said, the Commission will monitor all this and will be able to issue, if you may, Matthew, allow me, a sort of a European digital warrant to act immediately. So that's really the way it will work. And by the way, again, this is something very important for all the platforms. You are speaking about big platforms, but including the new one, or including very big platforms which were operating in the EU without having a legal representative. They will have an obligation to have a legal representative in Europe. But of course, the principle of choosing the country where you want to settle will belong to the platforms.
Thank you. We move to Catherine FEORE.
Hello.
We've lost you, Catherine. Can you start over, please? Oops. Okay. Yeah. No. Sorry for this. Our daily bread. Catherine, one last try. Yeah, go ahead. No. Yeah, now it's working. Go ahead. Grab the opportunity.
Okay. Play. All right. So, my question is, you said, Commissioner BRETON, that you want an open market where everybody is welcome. And from what I see, you've taken, in the past, it's been sort of a presumption of innocence, you could say, for the GAFA, where you'll sort of wait and see what happens and then test them through competition rules, etc. And yet other players, particularly in the Asian market, have been, there's been a presumption of guilt in some sense. Will these proposals rebalance this approach and create a level playing field? And you've also spoke about an ecosystem, a fair, free and fair competition ecosystem. And as has already been mentioned, people like companies like Amazon, their average tax is 9.5%. Retail on the streets, which is under huge pressure at the moment, is 23.2% on average. But that's not free and fair competition. And by dividing up the digital and the normal market, you're still not addressing this imbalance.
Thank you, Catherine.
No, but I think, Catherine, we regulate, again, for a level playing field. I think that's very important to understand that. So that all businesses will have the same opportunities, no matter the nationality. This is really something which is important. We also have civil law, and that does not presuppose guilt, of course, just clear rules for everyone, as I said at the beginning. We are not targeting anybody. In DMA, we have just based, again, our approach on objective criteria, and that's it. So I think this is very clear, and again, I know that in some other part of the world they have a different approach. For us, this is our approach. This is why we say it's a level playing field, and by the way, including, which is very important for us, within the internal market. Maybe Margrethe.
You want to add a word?
Yeah, well, sort of the idea is to say we can from our experience, from the special advisors, from others who have been looking into this, we can see that there are companies who play a very special role in the marketplace because of their size, because they are intermediaries between other businesses and customers or users, because they have been there for quite some time. And we then translate this role into what you could call rebuttable presumptions. And then it is for business to say, am I within this framework? If I am, well, then I will have to do these things and not to do these things. And that is, of course, a reflection both of the experience from competition law, but also going beyond competition law into what you could call unfair trading practices, and bringing some order in the digital space. I mentioned this traffic light that came on more than 100 years ago, that was sort of the first thing to make some order in digital space. And of course, I do hope that as we move forward, it will be a norm, that everyone will respect what is green and what is red, so that we get a different marketplace. Because, for instance, this example that I took about the use of data, that you cannot use the data of the people that you compete with just because you can. No, you have to make sure that you use data silos so that you have your own data and the people that you compete with, they have their own data. And that creates fairness in the marketplace. Because if you have everybody's data, well, then the risk you run is very, very low, because you can easily predict what people want and what they want to pay. If you have none or only very few data, you have a much higher risk. And that is also part of fair competition, that everyone will have to do their own assessment about what works in the marketplace, not that being completely unlevel because some have access to all the data. Or in the example of interoperability, that if you are a gatekeeper and you produce an extra service, that others are actually allowed to compete with you because they can also interoperate with the core service that you're providing. And that is also a very important element of fair competition. And this is why this will work to level the playing field. This will not solve everything like this. And there will be many other issues, and taxation is indeed one of them. But it's a fair step on a long road to make sure that all businesses, no matter their size, have a fair chance of reaching potential customers.
Thank you. We move to Mark Scott.
Good afternoon, everybody. I have a couple of questions. Just in terms of within the Commission, who is going to determine who is and who is not a gatekeeper? And per the proposals, is it fair to say that companies like Facebook, Google, Amazon and Apple fall into that definition? Second question is in terms of next steps. Where do you see the toughest negotiation now that the proposals are heading both to Parliament and Council? Thank you.
Well, once the regulation is adopted, it will come into effect after 6 months. Then it is for businesses sort of to notify themselves or to say, well, it may seem as if we're part of this, but we think we're not. And then the Commission will have some time to say, well, we think actually you're in scope for these do's and don'ts, or you're not, or to sort of investigate further to say we actually think that you're an emerging gatekeeper. So we will have this more sort of tailor-made approach as to how to make sure that competition can actually work freely also in the market where you have a strong position. And that is for the Commission to do that, but it will be sort of with these rebuttable presumptions so that the businesses will, of course, have a say, and they will have, all the necessary and obviously 100% legitimate guarantees when it comes to the legal procedures. When it comes to sort of next steps in the negotiation, I think that is very difficult to say. Because I think if you go through the European Parliament reports, you'd find things there which are not in here. You'll find things in here that are not in the European Parliament reports. Same goes for the member states, both those who have legislation already and those who consider legislation. We have been trying to find a balance to reach this very basically simple goal of making sure that offline and online merges. Not only what is illegal online is also illegal offline, other way around, but also what is legal offline is also legal online. And I think here there will be quite a number of debates, but of course that remains to be seen, and I'd say that we are ready.
Excellent, thank you. We move to Natalie McNellis. Natalie.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Natalie.
Okay, great. My question is for Executive Vice President Vestager, please. I had a question about merger control. There's been often a lot of complaints saying that gatekeepers like these shouldn't have ever been allowed to have certain acquisitions. Facebook shouldn't have been able to get WhatsApp or Instagram. And I'm wondering, is there something here in this DMA that helps you to deal with that problem, with the problem of like killer acquisitions? Is there something new here for merger control? Can you block things that you couldn't have blocked otherwise? Can you ask for more conditions than you couldn't have asked? Thanks.
What is in here is an obligation to notify if you acquire a smaller company that will not meet the merger thresholds. As you will probably know, we have been working with this for quite some time in order to make sure that we will actually see these acquisitions. So this is one of the things that we do. We ask for a notification if one of the companies in the scope of this legislation, if they acquire a smaller company. But we'll also proceed on the work that we are doing with member states in order to have the national competition authorities to notify us if they see something in the marketplace and they wonder, shouldn't someone look at this much closer? Obviously, we develop our analysis, and in here there is no sort of new merger criteria, but obviously we will keep looking if a acquisition sort of makes a position more entrenched, if it raises barrier to entry, that sort of issues, as we have done in the different cases that we actually have seen because they have been referred to us.
Maybe if you allow me, of course, we are not here to block business. We are just here to organize ourselves. And what is very new, as Margrethe said, is that we will be able to be informed, and we will make sure. If you take the example that you mentioned, I don't name any company on stage, but you're the one who is now under scrutiny on the other side of the ocean. I mean, at the beginning, nobody thought that it could become what it is today. And then 4, 5, 6 years later, they realized and they decide they have to take actions. For us, if a gatekeeper wants to make an acquisition, you can do it. You're free, of course. You will notify us. And we are also, I mean, we are watching that. We will just watch on a regular basis what's happening. And if we discover, because we will be able to follow what's happening, asking also companies, if we discover that in the stage of evolution, because of this acquisition, it hit our criteria of the DMA, we will act. And then we will not have to wait until it happens. But by the way, it could be another very smart acquisition, which will help business, help innovation, and so on. Just again, an ability to monitor what's happening. That's it, but it's already important.
Thank you. We move to Alexander Fanta. Alexander.
Hey.
Alexander. Try again.
Alexander Fanta with...
Yeah. That's good. Go ahead.
But that's refreshing with an empty shelf. Usually people present all their books.
It's a critique on modern capitalism. My question... Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and we're having a bit of fun. Sorry, Alexander.
My question concerns the interoperability of services. The DMA states that gatekeeper platforms should allow business users and providers of auxiliary services to access and interoperability with their services, which would potentially, as I understand it, pave the way for, for instance, the Commission to tell WhatsApp to make its service interoperable with other messaging services. Could you explain a bit how that works? And particularly, my question would be whether the Commission, whether that could entail the Commission telling services like WhatsApp to introduce backdoors to encryption for law enforcement.
Oh wow, that was tricky.
Not the first time he asked.
Oh, and a number of things at the same time. It's not a given that interoperability will. No, I don't know. Because the point of interoperability is that if you have a core platform service, can be a social network, can be an operating system. If you then put on an extra service, in my example here, a payment service, could also be a marketplace, well, then you have to allow for others also to compete against you with a payment service or with a marketplace. So in that respect, that other services can interoperate with your core platform service in these different respects. I don't know how that will deal with sort of more criminal investigations. we have sort of very carefully been weighing out here to say, well, what rules should there be if, for instance, some of the things that are seen online are criminal, that there is a risk of the safety of individuals, that then you can actually take down a service for a certain time while it's investigated. And also, since you have this for sort of less damaging, or at least not criminal in that respect, illegal content, that when you take it down and you have to alert those that were the original authors of the material that it has been taken down, then you have to maintain it for some time. And here it may be that the police, I don't know what, but at least you cannot just throw it out immediately, because you need to alert the people who actually put it up in the first place. But this has not been sort of the main scope of this regulation whatsoever, so it's just a test of giving you at least part of a response to what you're asking.
If I may say, Alexander, I remember very well, if I can have the microphone, I remember very well that you asked that question last week during the press conference with Vice President Skinas and Commissioner Johansson on the security union elements that were presented last week. You got a precise answer from Commissioner Johansson last week on that very specific question. So clearly these are different subjects that we are dealing with today. Monsieur Breton.
Interoperability is really something which is in the DSA, and that's very important, and the DMA. What we said is that interoperability measures will have to be ensured by the platform themselves. And of course, we will check if they are effective. So we will give us the means to be able to check that they put in place interoperability. By the way, it was a little bit the case, you remember, for the telco universe. So as we will just check they do this properly. And you're right, Eric. Encryption is totally out of the scope, but you may find again some specific rules in specific sectorial legislation that we may plug in, like, for example, terrorism or other things, but not in the transversal, again, regulation that we propose today.
Thank you. We now move to Louise.
Hello, and thank you for this briefing. A question on the DSA. There's an argument that you're trying to pool a lot of different activities here in the same regulation. I mean, that the question of regulating hate speech is different from dangerous toys, which is different again from cosmetics. And maybe it would be a better idea to, instead of regulating sort of all these business models together, you should regulate activity so that the people selling toys should be under the same rules, whether it's online or offline. What do you say to this whole strain of argument? Thank you.
Well, to some degree they are under the same rules, because the rules concerning the toy, well, these are the same rules. What it especially cannot have as a content, and what is illegal when it comes to, for instance, child pornography or child abuse, terrorist content, bomb recipes, that is illegal. End of story. What we are doing here is to make sure that you can actually get rid of it. That's the point. And that is exactly why it's about how the services are provided. The Know Your Customer obligation. You should know who's putting things up for sale here. Because what we have, I think, numerous examples of is that people who sell dangerous stuff, they are taken down and then, poof, you have them back again. Because the platform doesn't know them sufficiently, so they cannot make sure that this doesn't happen. And when it comes to content, it's basically the same thing. You need to do the due diligence so that if, for instance, a trusted flagger says, well, this shouldn't be here, it's illegal, that you're actually there to take it down. Because what is illegal is the same thing. It is in national legislation, it's in European legislation, it's in the different demands on products. That is the same. This is about how the services they are performed.
And I think, as we said at the beginning, what is the DSA, what is not the DSA? The DSA do not regulate content. The DSA just give obligations. So we do not regulate content. Just vertical legislation that you may plug in will have their own requirements, both in terms, by the way, of sanction and also action by the platforms. And we will make sure that in these regulations that member states may do, that maybe the EU may do, we'll make sure that the platforms have well put in place the tools to do it. But again, it's not about regulating content.
Okay, if you have time, we still have 4 questions. We will now move to Naomi.
Thank you very much for taking my question. So just quickly, we mentioned a little bit about Irish regulatory powers. Today we had the first fine of under GDPR of one of the tech companies, only €450,000, some 4 years after the offence. Is that like meaningful at all for a company that has a turnover of 3.5 billion? And does that bode well for implementation of these new rules? And then if you could comment more generally on if you think that regulatory powers in Ireland are sufficient given their huge responsibilities on behalf of the EU. Thank you.
You want? Well, I shall not make any judgment when it comes to GDPR and how that was done. The point is here to say, well, here you have enforceable rules, and you have fines up till 6% of global turnover in the Digital Services Act, up till 10% in the Digital Markets Act. So you have a fine range that is substantial, and you have a mechanism that makes sure that no authority is left behind. That should be more often a European anthem, I think. No authority left behind in order to be able to do their job. And here, each national authority, no matter where a platform registers themselves, will be in a network with the host countries and with the Commission on board. So we have been trying to think how to make an efficient system while making sure that we can preserve the country of origin principle. Because that is very efficient when you want one digital single market, that you can just register one place. And again, I think this is very important also for smaller businesses. Because if you want to scale your business, it's a good thing that, oh, you're registered where is your home, where you sort of started your business, and you don't have to do more. And here again, you don't have to employ lawyers to sort of try to figure out what are then the rules in the next market, national market, where you want to go. So this is the balancing act here, to make it simple also for the smaller ones who want to scale up, while at the same time making the enforcement system more efficient.
This is different from GDPR, and I think it's important to repeat it, just to highlight also your question. Our approach of fines is proportionate, graduate, and deterrent if it's necessary, and this means that we have a toolbox beyond financial fines objectives. That's the only thing that we have. We will put forward again a European mechanism, which we believe will be efficient. But again, it is really different from the GDPR strategy.
Thank you. We move to Samuel Sultan.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Samuel.
Good stuff, thank you. I'd just like to know what exactly happened with the original idea behind the new competition tool, and the previous goal there was to be able to intervene in tipping markets or even detect signs of tipping markets. And secondly, there are reports recently that suggest the Commission will soon approve the acquisition of Fitbit by Google. If that acquisition goes ahead further down the line, how would the DMA, when eventually adopted, impact future business practices as part of acquisitions such as these? Thank you.
As you said, we consulted on what we call the new competition tool and got a lot of different feedback. As Thierry also said numerous times, we got a lot of feedback. What we decided was to create what we then decided to call the Digital Markets Act. So our thinking developed from the consultation into the proposal that we have tabled today. And sort of the original idea of the new competition tool has been folded in the Digital Markets Act to say, well, we have this starting point where gatekeepers can be designated, then they have to do the do's and not do the don'ts, but the dynamic comes from the idea of a new competition tool, because we can do investigations. We can do investigations, of course, both to see if they live up to what they should, but also do investigations to see, well, what are emerging gatekeepers and what sort of tailor-made sets of obligations should they live up to? And that is exactly to make sure that we don't have the tipping of markets, the tipping of a market that creates another gatekeeper that would then fall into the first category. And that, for us, of course, is important because that gives a dynamic. Also, it gives us a dynamic that can improve the Digital Markets Act eventually with the different do's and don'ts, but also to prevent that we get a series of tipping markets here. That was the original idea, and now we have folded that into the Digital Markets Act. On the second question, I don't comment on ongoing cases. Again, one of the things that will be important is that if you are a gatekeeper and you have a core platform service, then if you compete with others in sort of extra services next to that, you will have to provide interoperability. You will have to make it possible for others to compete against you in these extra services or extra markets so that others actually have a fair chance of competing against you.
Maybe one word, Eric, if you allow me. We thought really a lot and we decided, as Margrethe said, to take the best from the two ideas, the empower of ex ante and the flexibility of market investigation. And I think this is really, again, why it's maybe new and original, because we were looking again at the experience and also being able to act quickly. For the second question, I mean, of course, if this is a gatekeeper, we will monitor the gatekeeper. And we will have, of course, all information to see what's happening with this acquisition, and then we will follow. And if we realize that there is something wrong, like an economic strength, or which we believe could create some damages, some user lock-in, or I don't know, any kind of things which are again in the DMA, which is happening now because of this acquisition, then we will enforce. And we will ask to correct, and if they don't correct, we have all the gradations of our sanctions. That's it.
Thank you. We move to Thibault. Let's see. Thibault, just a reminder, it's on DSA DMA. Huh? If not...
Can I ask the question?
Go ahead.
So I understand that today's initiative is very much about preventing very large platforms from undermining fundamental rights and harming the marketplace. But what about member states which misuse competition rules to undermine fundamental rights and distort the marketplace? I think about Budapest, who keeps favoring pro-governmental media by giving most of the public subsidies. They changed merger rules to do that. There's a state aid case from 2016, I understand too, about that. About this, there's also Poland. You just allowed a merger between Orlen and Lotos to go ahead. They argued that they would be in position to invest in the Green Deal, and the first big investment they make is to buy the biggest Polish press group, putting press freedom in danger according to the first reactions available. So can you tell us what you have done so far to prevent Hungary from misusing competition and stated policy to distort the market for news and restrict freedom of expression? Can you commit to use your enforcement powers to ensure that Poland and Hungary do not get rid of the free press by misusing competition policy? And would you be up to championing a Media Markets Act listing do's and don'ts to prevent states from meddling with the free press?
Thank you very much, Thibault. I think the rules are clear. This is a press conference on the college readout and on the proposals on DSA and DMA that have been made today. And despite the really big interest of your questions, they're out of scope of today's press conference. So with my apologies, we will move to the last question today from Jacob Perry.
Good evening, Commissioner, Executive Vice President. Jacob Perry from PAR. Just a question on whether there's been any reflection on what might be the institutional location of the unit responsible for overseeing the DMA. Has that been reflected on yet, or is that to come for a later day? And then another follow-up question just on how the DMA will interact with Article 102. That phrase, without prejudice, perhaps you could put it into layman's terms. Will there be any strictures on the Commission when it comes to deciding on how it will use Article 102 and the DMA? Thank you.
Well, yes, we have the intention of having the Commission to do with the DMA. And the second question, without prejudice to 101 or 102, means that, of course, 101 and 102 can be enforced whenever there is a case. And that, of course, is what will have to be the balancing act, because as you will have seen from some different do's and don'ts, a lot of them are actually informed by cases that we've had previously. In the Google cases, the first Amazon case. So, of course, we will be very careful to see if someone is complaining towards someone who is designated a gatekeeper, if that has to do with sort of the do's and don'ts in there, or maybe it's a new behavior by what could then be a dominant company. So that will have to be completely integrated in the way that the DMA will be enforced. How we can do that, both when it comes to misuse of dominant position, but also when it comes to businesses actually meeting up and in doing that, disturbing the market as in 101. But that is for the future to see how it develops. I personally think that we will still have plenty of 102 cases, and that will then inform sort of future versions of the Digital Markets Act, because, well, it has developed just in the years that I've been here.
And the Commission will enforce, and as soon as everything will be done, believe me, we will be at the rendezvous. On sera au rendez-vous.
Merci beaucoup de votre participation. Thank you very much for your participation. And we have another press event now, technical briefing on non-performing loans. So please stay connected. Thank you very much for your attention.